Alright, so we're going to do simple image mapping, and then we're going to use also a map to emboss something. We'll do some vertex coloring and very basic UV mapping. Alright, so we can start even with this little box. What you will need are a few images. And you don't want a really large images because we're playing with the monitor resolution. So, and you will check as you render. It depends also if you're zooming in and having a detail and so on. But allow yourself to have a few different versions of the same image and experiment. But generally, we don't have to have them extremely large. All right, so we have our images. We can start with the default box. This is just to show you how to do image mapping. I'm assuming you will do much more interesting object than this default box. Coming on the image materials and then clicking on the textures. All right, and if you have a texture, great. Then all what you want to say under type, you're gonna do image or movie. Then you're gonna open, navigate, come to here, and I'm gonna do this one for now. All right, and let me just check where my light is so we can see. Come here, render the image, and I have something like that. All right, so if I select my box, come back to material and the textures, what I will notice if I scroll down, that map projection is flat, but it can be cube too. So if it's a cube, then it will apply that image to the cube. All right. I can also have different kind of objects and shapes. So if I had, for example, a sphere, then I guess the appropriate image for map for that would be Alright, so I'm just navigating, I'm just repeating those steps we did before. Let's say Tiffany. Alright, and if I do projection, sphere would be probably the best way to go. Alright, now you can also notice that under the image mapping, I can repeat the image. So I can increase the number of the images, right? You can also explore option to mirror something. So that all helps you to get to the effect that you wanted. So you're looking at your original image and you're seeing how you want. You can also just offset. So if you have to move something and kind of navigate the map, you'll do that here. If you want to size it and so on. Notice that the influence is directly into the color, and in most of the cases that's what you wanted. Maybe you can also explore and see how that works if I apply with the normals and get some kind of bumpy effect. But in overall, usually we're using it, this case, just to wrap something, right? And you can play with that. The same way goes with if I have, actually I'm going to do it this window or this window. Shift A and add a plane and then scale it a little bit. See. All right, come here and now I can say, okay, here's my material, new. Here's my texture, new. And instead of clouds, it's an image, and I open, and I take this one, small, and open, and render, and I have something like that. Or you can maybe unwrap that and use for UV mapping, all right? So that's simple image mapping is extremely easy and fun to do it. All right, if I want to apply some kind of embossing, it's the same thing. I'm again just using my image that I already prepared in the Photoshop, usually some kind of simple logo or something like that. Now this time you might want to also use that as a color, but the main thing is to use it as normals. So if I render the image, I'm getting some kind of embossing effect. All right. Maybe I can move it down so actually somebody can see something. All right. And you can play with going in a plus or minus, depending what would you like to have. All right. The next thing we can quickly do is vertex paint, and in that case, in the case of vertex paint, you need to subdivide. So I click subdivide, and the more vertices you have, well, the better geometry you can have. So you can have something like this, and hopefully your object will be a little bit more complex than mine. The important step is to go into the vertex paint. Under material, we have to have new, but we're gonna mark here, scroll down and say vertex color paint. As long as you're in the vertex paint, you will have these options to color, to change the radius of your brush, change the strength, explore different tools, how the color will be applied, and so on. So you can, play with it. And again, I do hope you'll have much more interesting objects to apply for that. Don't forget to turn on vertex color paint. Let me grab my, so we can actually see it. All right, and we have something like that. So it's pretty easy. The last one that I would like to show you is UV map. So let's have a cube, and let's you know what? Let me start from the orthographic view. Shift A, and let's do the cube, because I will need to scale it and so on. So it's much better if we start with orthographic view. And scale Z. Now, ideally, I should have the sizes of my box aligned to the size of my image. And as you can see, I don't, but you should. So here we go. And then all right, we have our box. The other thing I'm going to do, I'm going to make another window. Come here. Drag this one here. This window I will turn to UV image editor, and don't get confused if you see your previous render. This one I will have as my 3D. So I have my object. I come here. I have to start with a new material, and I do have to go into the textures and make it textures and go into the image remove. So all those steps are the same. And I have to navigate and find where my image is and open the image. All right. But now what will be different is coordinates under the mapping. So I'm in my textures. I got my file, and I will say UV. All right. So that's one thing. Here in the UV map, I'm going to open that image that I'm going to use. And here, I'm going to just use this reference to explain Blender how this image that I brought here will be applied to my object. All right? Simple enough. Let's go in edit mode for my box. And under edit mode, let's go in a line or edge selection mode. Deselect. What I will need to do, you see a 3D object, and this is a 2D image. So I have to cut, somehow open, make a scene to my object, unwrap it, and position in 2D space. All right? So I have to make cuts here, which should be this line, this line, this line, this line, and then behind. All right? This one, this one, this one. So this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. All right. Right click. Shift, right click, and so on. And I think that's it. So under the mesh, edges, mark seam. All right. Then I'm gonna go back to my face, select all, back to my mesh, UV unwrap, just the basic UN unwrap it. Here it is. And if it happens like that, it happens. I will hit R to rotate. So the same commands we're doing 3D window, we're gonna do G to grab, position as close as we can. All right. And then again, right click, grab. We can even grab and hit X, so to stay in X. Right click, shift, right click, grab, X, right? So maybe your map will look a little bit different and unwrap different. That's perfectly fine because I didn't start with the right object. I should have object measured and build exactly how my map looks like, but I didn't. Grab one. So now I have more work to do. That always happens, right? So so this one is the long, so this one would be the short. This one should be short, something like that. All right. And if I'm here, have a texture, you can start seeing how this could look different. So if I have it like this, and if I grab, check this, how the top panel is changing, right? So something like that. And then if I position everything correctly, I just see I have some little gap there. Grab X. Boom, boom, boom. Grab X. So UV mapping is extremely, after this first initial kind of block, say, ooh, it's too complex. Actually, it's quite easy and it will take you much less time to develop something like this than to try to pinpoint all this just in a blender. And then you can end up with a pretty neat object, good looking. And UV mapping you can use also to apply to different characters and so on, wine bottles, lots of objects, any kind of labels and so on. So it's pretty, it's good.